I think medical imaging and regulatory are both two things that when they're working well, nobody thinks about them because you don't have to. So we talked about, ultrasound. So when you're pregnant and you have your 20-week ultrasound, you're thinking, is my baby a boy or are they a girl? You're not thinking, how did this ultrasound transducer come to market? At least most people aren't thinking that. So like I said, when these things work well, people don't think about them. And really, that's what we hope this book does, is to get people thinking. We trust from cradle to grave so much of our medical care and lives to these devices working properly. And it's really just important that people understand, when we trust these devices, what has happened before then to make sure that they're trustworthy. And I think that's what our book tries to explain. It's an interesting question. I mean, like I said, I teach classes in regulatory, and when you do regulatory education, you tend to aim for this very broad audience. So everything you teach is about devices or drugs, and not really about a specific device. And there are some things broadly that apply to many, many devices, like let's say biocompatibility or sterility or software. But in radiological health, you have issues among other issues, but like you have radiation. And so you have a lot of unique issues, like the dose of radiation that's delivered to patients, or the use of pharmaceutical drugs, which are drugs that actually deliver radio, or they themselves are radioactive sources. So, like I said, these issues they're very important to medical care, but they're specific to radiological health. And a lot of people who are preparing broad education on devices may not have background in this area, and that's really, I think, part of the reason that it doesn't make it into general device courses. I think if I were a healthcare provider and I were using these devices, so if I were a radiologist or radiation oncologist or even a CT tech or a medical physicist, I'd kind of want to know this device that I use on patients, how did it come to market? What sort of testing was done on it? How did it, what was the process by which this device came to my hospital? If I were interested in how AI-based medical imaging devices are coming to market, I'd want to read it too. If I were starting a startup or something like that, I think this is helpful, gives an overview of the field. So those are just some things that come to mind. And of course, if I were a patient who was ever medical imaged and I had questions about, what was done to make sure that this device is safe and effective, I'd be interested too. For takeaways, I think radiological devices are in class 2 mostly, not all of them, but most of them. And people therefore think, okay, class 2, you just have to prove substantial equivalence. So it must be straightforward. But actually, I think what's surprising is to see how non-straightforward it is. And why is that? Because when you're talking about radiological images, so much depends on the quality of the image. And the quality of an image is hard to measure. Just like if I ask you, is a photo good or bad, that's hard to answer because it means different things in different contexts to different people looking at the image. What would surprise the readers? I think I was surprised to learn that the major post-market episode in nuclear medicine had actually nothing to do with radiation, instead with a gamma camera that was falling on a patient. And I think another thing that really surprised me, we think of AI as this new thing, but it actually has a very long history in mammography. And after the first FDA clearance, which was actually a long time ago, it took a very long time to be adopted. And there were a lot of hurdles in the process of kind of its clinical use. So that was another thing that was surprising.
A fun fact about Jay and I and our time at the FDA is that we were actually office mates. And a lot of our colleagues were on the same floor, and we learned so much from each other in terms of expertise and how to handle reviews and questions. And incidentally, we both transitioned into industry as well. So this book really distills our learnings, both from the agency and industry. And that's what we really were excited about.
So yeah, I'd say that I think our FDA time really, for me at least, it's really influenced. I mean, it taught me regulatory, but then once I moved outside FDA, it taught me that kind of the FDA perspective is very important, but it's really only one piece of a much broader landscape. And so I think that's part of the reason we've tried to pull in authors from industry and from consulting and made sure kind of the whole field is really represented. I think in general, the fundamental philosophy of FDA is kind of that your data that you provide should support whatever marketing claims that you're trying to make about your device. And I think that's where a lot of companies fall down sometimes, is just not having that support. And part of it is because in this field of radiological health, so much depends on image quality. And image quality is a subjective and slippery thing to measure. And like the same image can have different qualities if you're doing different things with it, because the quality is really how well can a doctor do what they need to do using the image, and different doctors could be doing different things. So yeah, so it's really image quality and how to measure image quality. That's really what sometimes companies fall down on. So when I first joined FDA, at the time my boss told me, it takes two people about 2 years to feel confident as a reviewer. And when my 2 years was up, I thought about why did it take that long? And I feel like part of the reason for that huge learning curve was that there was very little in writing, or very little written about the regulation of radiological health. And certainly there was nothing that collected all of it in one place, and nothing that included perspectives from industry also. And so this is really, for me, this is really a resource that I wish I had when I started. And even as I grew and went on, once I became specialized on a particular device, it was very easy to get tunnel vision and not know what was going on in the rest of the space. So if you can just quickly read a chapter and know what's going on in mammography or something, that's great. It gives you sometimes insight into your own modality and how your management, who deals with many modalities, might think, because they work across them. And someday maybe you will also work across modalities, and it's helpful to have that preparation.
And my perspective is really touching on COVID. And ever since COVID, there's a lot of working remote. And compared to the days where Jay and I were office mates, folks have a lot less opportunities to be able to have face-to-face discussions and learnings. And that's why the intention of this book is allow us to be able to distill all learning for future recruits and future reviewers at the FDA. So for both Jay and I, we both have our PhDs. We have published personally, we have published book chapters, journals, proceedings. But I think we're at a point where we can distill our FDA and also industry experience to really make this contribution. And this is what really excites me about this book.
When I was studying for the RAC exam, I used the RAPS fundamentals, and I really thought, it'd be fun to write one of these. And my expertise was radiological health, so that was the natural fit. I've spent most of my career working with radiation in some form or another. I trained as a physicist, and so it wasn't really a big jump that this would be the subject of it.
So from my perspective, this is the one-stop shop. We have seasoned authors from industry, including manufacturers, law firms, and also ex-FDA and current FDA experts contributing to this book.
I think everybody right now wants to know about artificial intelligence and machine learning in medicine, and radiology is the big place where it's really being deployed. We've tried to touch on AI in every single chapter of this book and give you some case studies of products that have made it to market. And also, what are some ways that AI is being applied apart from just the obvious one, which is computer-assisted diagnosis?